to the nation in a rare Oval Office address. It comes just a day after former President Trump was injured in an assassination attempt at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. Trump arrived here in Milwaukee just a short time ago. The FBI is leading this investigation, and it calls it a potential act of domestic terror. And we're learning new details from the FBI. They believe the shooter acted alone and does not have a motive yet determined. The shooter has been identified as 20-year-old Thomas Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. He was shot and killed by the Secret Service. The rally attendee killed has been identified as Corey Compratore, a Pennsylvania firefighter. Compratore was shot while attempting to protect his family. 2 other rallygoers were injured. They are in critical but stable condition. And this assassination attempt has sent shockwaves into the 2024 presidential race. This morning, Trump posted a powerful message on Truth Social. He said this: "In this moment, it is more important than ever that we stand united and show our true character as Americans, remaining strong and determined and not allowing evil to win." Here's the president.
For us to lower the temperature in our politics and to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer, whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times, that the choice in this election we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, a God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of all goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created a democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
And there you have President Biden from the Oval Office in a rare address, beginning his comments by saying we need to lower the temperature in our politics. I want to bring in Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. And Nancy, this is the third time we've heard from the president about the assassination attempt. Why has he chosen to speak so regularly to the American people on this topic?
Well, because the Oval Office, Nora, is the ultimate symbol of continuity. It has flowed from Republicans to Democrats, back to Republicans. It is a sign of the strength of this democracy, and it was a fitting location for this president as he made a call at a time when the American people are quite rattled for unity. He went on to give a brief update on the investigation, but really what he wanted to talk about was political violence and the heated rhetoric that can often fuel that violence. We're still 3.5 months out from Election Day, and there is a desire from both parties to bring down the temperature so we don't see something like this happen again.
Nancy, stay with us from the White House. Want to bring in Major Garrett, our chief Washington correspondent. And what did you make of the president's comments?
So the president is trying to stitch together a country that has a deep memory about what it has found offensive about the other political party. And everyone in America who is very partisan knows exactly what drives them crazy about what the other party says about them. And they can recount it almost in verse. Faults, aggressive language, things that they thought crossed a line and they can't forgive. What the president is saying, that's the past. If we're going to move forward in this election and do so peacefully, we don't have to forget that, but we have to forgive one another for rhetorical excesses. And I think we'll have a sign of that, Nora, if anyone in political leadership who has said something that is viewed in this current context as excessive, crossing the line, not only says we should bring the temperature down, but I apologize. I shouldn't have said what I said 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. That could apply to President Biden. It could apply to former President Trump. It could apply to many members of Congress. That will be, to my mind, consistent with what the president is asking the country to do and political leaders to do. Not only bring the temperature down going forward, but be reflective about how the rhetoric up until now has created this sense, not only of division, but anger and a sense of isolation and alienation from one another.
You're not expecting anybody to apologize, are you?
I'm not, but I'm saying that is a measure for Americans who are trying to gauge just how real this moment is. Is this a glimmer of light in what has been rhetorically a very dark space for this country, or is it just a momentary pause in which we will calm things down and then return to our partisan battlements? I don't know, but I do know if someone who's been in the public arena does apologize, that will be an act of reflection that might have some longevity.
I want to bring in Robert Costa. He is our chief election and campaign correspondent. And Robert, I know you have covered a number of these conventions as well. They are generally full of speeches that are full of red meat. You are trying to rile up your most fervent supporters and draw a very sharp contrast with your opponent. Is there any indication that that will change?
Nora, good to be with you. This was not a campaign moment tonight for President Biden. It was an attempt to have a presidential moment. I was speaking to confidants of President Biden. They know, as you say, the Republican National Convention begins tomorrow. But they also know if you took just 2 or 3 steps away from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, what would you see? A bust not of a former president, but of someone who almost became president, someone who ran and died in 1968. President Biden keeps a bust of Robert F. Kennedy, the former New York senator, in the Oval Office. Every day he looks at it, I'm told, and he thinks about Robert F. Kennedy's speech after Martin Luther King was gunned down, Dr. King, in 1968. Robert F. Kennedy spoke to the nation's better angels. He quoted a poet, Aeschylus, as he tried to ask the nation to come together. Biden in the Senate in the 1970s sees assassination attempts against President Ford, sees President Reagan shot in 1981. Someone's for a half century on the American scene watching violence. Violence prompts him into the race. After Charlottesville in 2017, he ultimately wins the presidency in 2020. So this is a moment where a convention is beginning. But it is also a presidential moment where you have the current occupant of the office communicating to the country about an attack on his predecessor, an unprecedented moment and a moment of fragility in the American political system.
It's an excellent point, Robert. I want to bring back in Nancy Cordes, who covers the White House. And there's clearly an element of hope within all of this. President Biden hoping that the rhetoric can change. But that's, it's a hope. It's difficult, certainly for these candidates in this political climate. What about what President Biden has been saying in a number of the comments that he made, even earlier today?
Right. So he's hoping for the best, but also preparing for the worst. And he laid out some action items when it comes to security after he met with his national security team in the Situation Room. First of all, he said that he has consistently pushed for former President Trump to have all of the security that he needs, and he will continue to do so going forward to make sure that Mr. Trump is safe. Second, he said he had called upon the head of the Secret Service to take a look at all of the security that's planned for the Republican National Convention, which gets underway tomorrow, where you are in Milwaukee right now, to see if there's anything more that needs to be done that hadn't been planned yet. And then finally, Nora, he said that he was calling for an independent review of the security situation at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday. He's clearly aware of all of the questions that are swirling out there about how this shooter could have gotten so close to the former president in the first place. Clearly doesn't believe that the Secret Service or even the Department of Homeland Security can do this investigation itself, looking at what possibly went wrong. And so that's going to be done by some sort of outside entity. We don't know which yet.
Yeah, the FBI Director Christopher Wray, the Attorney General today, is saying that this assassination attempt was an attack on democracy. Want to bring in Scott McFarland because Scott was there at the rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania, when the shooter opened fire. Scott, good to talk to you again. And when you hear the president's remarks, how do you think they'll be received?
A person in the 9th row of the shooting spree yesterday, Nora, says, I guess this is what our county's going to be known for now, forever. linked to an attempted assassination of a president. Butler County, Pennsylvania is just north of the county in which Pittsburgh resides. It is Trump country. He won this county 2-1 in 2020. But what we're hearing from so many people here transcends concerns about politics and speaks to what the president just addressed, that there is a toxicity in our politics that is clearly dangerous. This is a traumatized community. Like I did in the front row of the press rafters, thousands of people at this rally watched chaos yesterday, had bullets whiz over their heads, saw children running and screaming. There is a visceral reaction and connection, Nora, Butler County, Pennsylvania has to what happened yesterday, and it's very little to do with politics.
Scott McFarland, thank you for your excellent coverage there. And, you know, Major Garrett, that is true. Trump has a visceral connection with his supporters.
They see his campaign in 2016 as challenging all sorts of orthodoxies in America, starting with the Republican establishment, which they didn't think was responsive. Trump defeats that. Trump wins the presidency in a surprising 2016 outcome. And Trump supporters believe from that moment he was denied not only the idea that, hey, wow, you won a presidency. Isn't that amazing? Immediately ostracized, criticized, resistance, and pummeled and demonized by the left consistently. That is something that Trump supporters will not forget, cannot forget. And they overlook indictments. They overlook January 6th. They overlook fraud allegations and substantive proof of fraud on the president's part and his businesses, all because they believe he represents something fighting on their behalf and is relentlessly attacked. They will see this episode in Butler, Pennsylvania, as an extension of that, even though it is not. But back to the point the president made in his remarks. Partisan rhetoric does not exist in a vacuum. Partisans in our country right now, Nora, right and left, not only expect it, they demand it and they reward it. They reward it with their votes and they reward it with their small dollar donations. Everyone in the political arena knows that. That level of expectation, that demand curve, for aggressive rhetoric because you're fighting up for something that's so important is part of this equation. We are all wrapped up in that equation. The president tonight is asking us to consider our own involvement in that equation and reflect and possibly start anew.
The question is, will this be a turning point in this heated presidential election? Major Garrett, thank you. Ahead, we'll take a closer look at the investigation into the shooting and how it was possible for the gunman to get so close to Donald Trump.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Your Holiness, what an honor. So wonderful to meet you.
What's it like to have a conversation with the Pope? You're about to find out.
When you look at the world, what gives you hope?
60 Minutes takes you inside the Vatican for a rare and extensive interview with Pope Francis.
Welcome back. Investigators are zeroing in on a motive, but law enforcement says the shooter in the attempted assassination of former President Trump used an AR-style semi-automatic rifle. He was about 410 feet away from where former President Trump was speaking. The suspect was shot and killed by Secret Service agents seconds after shots were fired. And we learned today that the gun was legally purchased by and registered to the shooter's father. Investigators have many more questions. And of course, on Capitol Hill, they are talking about launching an investigation into the Secret Service. Let's bring in CBS's Nicole Skenga. And Nicole, what did we learn today from the FBI who's leading this investigation?
Yeah, this investigation is being treated as domestic terror, this attempt on the former president's life. The shooter acted alone, according to authorities, who point out this is in its very early stages. This investigation remains ongoing, but at this time, no mental health record by the gunman, no criminal history, no derogatory information known by law enforcement. The biggest unknown here, motive. CBS News has learned that the shooter here was a bit of a gun fanatic. In fact, he was part of at least one gun club in recent years. The T-shirt he was wearing during the attacks that unfolded yesterday boasted of a popular firearm YouTube channel. He was described by some of his friends as a shy loner, some of his classmates as someone who was more popular. A bit of a mystery around what he was like at school when he graduated just 2 years ago. Everyone's seemingly shocked by the events that unfolded. Moving forward, law enforcement currently transporting all of the evidence 300 miles southeast to FBI laboratories in Quantico, where they will go through the gunman's phone, trying to unlock it right now. They'll also look at the explosive materials, those bomb materials that were found today in the gunman's residence, as well as in his vehicle. Those are being described by law enforcement officials as rudimentary. You mentioned the AR-style weapon, the rifle that was used by the gunman. Of course, ATF and FBI tracing that gun back to the shooter's father. And in the coming days, there will be more interviews. We're told the family is cooperating, but trying to determine whether the gun was stolen by the gunman from his father or whether it was willingly given, perhaps a sign of future charges, Nora.
Nicole Skenga, thank you. I want to bring in CBS News' Scott McFarland because he was there at the rally when that shooting occurred. And Scott, what are some of the questions that you have because you witnessed this and you have seen the crime scene today?
Oh, we have a few, Nora. Let's start with what's happening on site right now. This shooting happened at a rally held at a family fair center where there's usually a farm show or a family picnic. Thousands of people were there, Nora, but we all were ordered out minutes after the shooting, told to leave our stuff in place, just get out. It's like somebody hit the pause button on that site as the FBI and investigators combed through it looking for some type of answers, some type of evidence. But the questions so many people have, including those of us who were in the rafters, how did such a monumental, unequivocal failure happen that what was supposed to be a uniquely safe event would be the site of horror? Linda Green got here real early yesterday. She wanted one of those good seats up front. And she told us she has that question too. Who let her and the others down?
I was like, why weren't they on that guy? If I heard that they had actually gone up on the roof, that somebody had seen, some spectators seen him going up on the roof, well, why didn't they like get on it? And there were people talking about it, and he was like, well, we told them and no one listened. So where is the Secret Service when you need them if we're there for protection?
You'd like some answers.
I'd like to have a lot of answers.
As the hours go by, these police barricades grow larger and wider. This is a unique, historic criminal investigation, and it's still underway, Nora.
And Scott, you cover Congress. Already there are calls to bring the head of the Secret Service up to Capitol Hill to answer some of the questions by these lawmakers.
What's most striking, Nora, is there are bipartisan calls for an investigation into this. Congress doesn't do much of anything bipartisan anymore, especially not right now. But everybody wants to know who let whom down, what should have been done that wasn't done, and what changes need to be made, even if Congress has to order them and fund them to prevent anything close to this from happening in the future.
Scott McFarland, thank you. Want to bring in CBS News consultant and former deputy director of the Secret Service, A.T. Smith. A.T., so good to have you. Was this a massive security failure? How was that shooter able to get so close?
That'll be determined with the investigation that the FBI is doing, but obviously there is no explanation whatsoever for how an individual was able to get on top of a building and be that close with a long rifle. I mean, that is just unacceptable. And the FBI's investigation, working hand in hand with the Secret Service, will look at every aspect of this advance. Did they examine the posting in the right way, all of the perimeters that needed to be in place from the inner perimeter to the middle to the outer perimeter. And that outer perimeter is what the counter sniper team is responsible for. They're responsible for a lone gunman or a long-range rifle. So that question has to be answered, particularly looking at it in the context of how close this individual was.
You know, A.T., I spoke with a witness today who was outside of that secure perimeter, as was this gunman. He and his wife said they spotted the gunman, thought he looked suspicious, saw the gun, alerted local police, who did get close to the gunman. So it appears that the rally-goers knew that this was a potential threat.
And there again is another problem. You know, the police, obviously, when they're notified about something, they're going to react. But in this scenario, it seemed that the folks on the ground, the participants or those attending, saw more than law enforcement did. And again, that is something that has to be examined, has to be explained on a certain level. So I'm looking for those answers. And again, this is something that will come out of this thorough investigation. You've heard that the president has ordered, obviously, a full review. And I know that the Secret Service will cooperate and work hand in hand with the entities in order to accomplish that, but it has to be explained.
A.T. Smith, thank you. Also want to bring in CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. And Samantha, I know you have worked with the Department of Homeland Security. You're familiar with a number of these issues. What stands out to you now that we are learning some new details today from the FBI?
Well, what stands out to me is that this threat of a lone actor or single individual engaging in mass casualty and high-profile violence is what we lived in real time, Nora, 26 hours ago. Lone actors or just single individuals are notoriously hard to detect and hard to prevent from engaging in violent activity. They typically don't talk to other people. This notion that this individual was a loner and didn't have a lot of friends is not surprising. And so it is harder to detect an individual who isn't in communication with others about plotting an attack. That really stood out to me. At the same time, I do want to emphasize we are really talking about two investigations right now. One led by the FBI into the perpetrator, and the other into this cascading set of missteps from an intelligence perspective, perhaps, and from an operational perspective that allowed the former president to nearly miss being assassinated. So we have those two concurrent investigations. At the same time, I am told by law enforcement sources that the online environment today is awash in calls for violence, conspiracy theories, and that is deeply concerning to law enforcement. In the aftermath of a mass casualty and high-profile event, I've worked, unfortunately, far too many mass shootings than I would have liked. There are often calls for retaliatory violence and copycat attacks. So law enforcement is juggling that along with the other lines of effort that I mentioned, Nora.
Sam, thank you. I want to bring back in A.T. Smith on that one more time, since you were deputy director at the Secret Service. The FBI indicating today there has been a spike in this worrisome political rhetoric online that could mean more violence. If you're looking at protectees, including the current president, Donald Trump, what do you do?
The Secret Service does monitor online activity, particularly when it comes to threats made against protectees. And as Sam said, that has increased over the last few days. It's increased dramatically over the last few years. And that's why the Secret Service initiated this section within headquarters to be able to monitor that sort of activities, whether it's groups making sort of statements or individuals. So they do monitor that. But again, the lone wolf is the one that flies under the radar. It's hard to detect, especially if they don't include their plans with others. And so it's a tough thing. It's an uphill battle, and it looks like that's sort of the profile of this individual.
Director Smith and Sam Vinograd, thanks to both of you. Also want to take a moment to show you a remarkable picture captured by New York Times photographer Doug Mills. Look closely. It appears to show a bullet soaring past the former president's head as he stood at the podium during yesterday's rally. This is incredible that you can see this. And of course, Doug Mills has covered presidents for more than 3 decades. And he said, quote, he has never been in a more horrific scene and had never envisioned being in a situation like this. This is one of the most respected White House photographers that's out there, and that he captured this image is just incredible. It's just part of the tapestry as we, as reporters, along with investigators, piece together what exactly happened and what is at the heart of this security failure. Ahead, how Saturday's event unfolded. We'll be right back.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis? You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Are piecing together the events leading up to the attempted assassination. CBS News' Maurice Dubois takes a closer look at the timeline.
Despite 90-degree heat, thousands descended on the Butler Farm Show, about 100 acres used for agricultural exhibitions and a place where Donald Trump has appeared before. Butler County voted overwhelmingly for Trump in 2020, so this was expected to be as friendly a crowd as you'd find in the country. The former president and presumptive Republican nominee took the stage at 6:03 p.m.
Hello, Butler, and hello to Pennsylvania.
At about the same time, a man was spotted on the roof of a building about 160 yards away. He was carrying an AR-style semi-automatic rifle. Spectators alerted police.
We noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle, absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage?
An armed officer attempted to check the roof. Michael Sloop is the Butler County Sheriff. He spoke with CBS station KDKA.
All I know is the officer had both hands up on the roof to get up onto the roof, never made it because the shooter had turned towards the officer, and rightfully and smartfully, the officer let go.
And then what happened next?
Well, assuming that the shooter turned his rifle back over towards the crowd and the rally and started shooting.
Probably 20 million people.
At 6:11 p.m., Mr. Trump was talking about immigration. Then the first 3 shots, which came from his right.
Take a look at what happened.
Followed by 3 more. And what sounded like an outgoing shot. Video recorded by a member of the audience shows snipers for the Secret Service aiming at something in the direction of the gunman.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Move to spare. Hold. When you're ready. On you.
Ready?
Move.
Up.
Move. Go.
Up. Hawkeye's here.
Hawkeye's here. Move it to spare.
Spare, get ready. Spare, get ready.
We ready?
Down. Down.
Are we good?
Shooter's down.
Shooter's down. Are we good to move?
We're good to move.
We're clear.
We're clear.
Let's move.
We're clear. Let me get my shoes.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes, sir.
Hold that in your head. It's bloody.
So we got to move to the bus. Let me get my shoes.
It took a minute and a half to get the former president off the stage, and as they tried to hustle him to his waiting SUV, he raised his fist several times in defiance and seemed to say, "Fight." Some people in the crowd turned their attention to 3 others who'd been shot. They included Corey Comparator, 50, a firefighter, dad, and big fan of Donald Trump. He had been shot in the head. Josh Shapiro is Pennsylvania's governor.
I asked Corey's wife if it would be okay for me to share that we spoke. She said yes. She also asked that I share with all of you that Corey died a hero. That Corey dove on his family to protect them last night at this rally. Corey was the very best of us. May his memory be a blessing.
2 other people were critically wounded. CBS News has learned one of the victims is in a medically induced coma. Trump was treated at a nearby hospital for the wound to his ear. At 8:42, he posted on Truth Social, "I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately something was wrong in that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place." President Biden made a statement in Delaware.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
Mr. Biden returned to the White House, where he was briefed on the assassination attempt. This morning, the FBI identified the gunman as Thomas Matthew Crooks. He was 20 years old and lived about 50 miles from the rally site in Bethel, Pennsylvania. He'd graduated with an engineering degree from a community college, but worked at a nursing and rehabilitation center. He was a registered Republican. A classmate told CBS News that Crooks had tried out for the high school's rifle team but failed to make it. Throughout the night and morning, investigators searched Crooks' home and car, where they say they found explosive devices. This afternoon, former President Trump released another statement on social media. "I was going to delay my trip to Wisconsin and the Republican National Convention," he said, "by 2 days, but have just decided that I cannot allow a shooter or potential assassin to force change to scheduling or anything else. Therefore, I will be leaving for Milwaukee as scheduled." He departed from Newark Airport in New Jersey and traveled to Milwaukee for the convention, where he will officially be nominated as his party's candidate for president. Now, in terms of the investigation tonight, the FBI says it's received more than 2,600 tips so far. Investigators are now working on that timeline in reverse now, if you will, from the shooting and all the moments leading up to it as they dissect the would-be assassin's life in the days and months prior to July 13th. Nora.
Maurice Dubois, thank you. Coming up, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy joins us here in Milwaukee after speaking with Donald Trump today.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did
English?
any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy spoke with Trump today and joins me here in Milwaukee. Good to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
How was Donald Trump today?
You know, what's so amazing, he came so close to losing his life last night. And he's upbeat. We talked about it. He talked to me about hearing the sound of the bullet slashing through his ear. But then he was in total Trump form, where he was educating me that, you know, there's a lot of blood within the ear. Kevin, you might learn this because you got big ears, you know, kind of humorous. But I could tell anybody that's been through it's got to change him somewhat, the sound of when he went through. But then he really wanted to thank those who had prayed for him. He was worried about the family, who the individual had died, coming to his event. But he was looking forward to coming up here in Milwaukee.
Did he seem shaken at all?
Not what you would thought of. No, I think he's been through so much in life. I mean, even if you take the last year, I don't know of any person that could go through indictments, trials, trying to thrown off, and now this. I mean, he has more fortitude than anyone I know, and to compartmentalize this. But this is a moment in time, though, I think will affect him in somewhat. You cannot be that close to losing your life, be in a situation where someone shot 8 bullets, where somebody in your own rally got shot, that it doesn't affect you in some manner.
How do you think it changes this presidential race?
I don't know politically where it's at. I think seeing how he dealt with that, if I'm just an average American citizen, I'm sitting back, how would my commander-in-chief act in a time of turmoil or others. I mean, I think he showed it's not something you script or others, but that picture of him standing up with a bloody face, a fist in the air with American flag behind it, that's an iconic picture that I think will last a generation. And I think people will look if they make a decision on leadership, it'll be no question. I think this is an opportunity, much that Reagan had, where you had Reagan Democrats. I think you're going to find people looking at Trump that maybe have never voted for a Republican before.
You were Speaker of the House on January 6th. We spoke that day. We were live on the air for more than 10 hours or so, and I remember our conversation vividly because you called on the president to come forward, come out before the cameras, and ask for the violence to stop. And you said this should be a moment that brings us together, not divides us. But it's almost like the rhetoric's gotten hotter since then.
It seems as though from all campaigns where I've never seen something like this where they go after somebody even through a Department of Justice and others. I hope all Americans reflect on this moment. Have you pushed something too far where a 20-year-old kid, we don't know his background, but he's got to have something mental, that would take an opportunity to try to assassinate somebody in a race? That you would question whether you're safe to go to affiliate with any political party that you were fearful of your life. That's not America. That's not democracy. I will tell you today, I had other leaders from other countries call me about what transpired, that they're concerned about democracy, even in their own country, what they're hearing coming back. And this is a moment in time all parties should reflect and know that they should tone it back. We've got to start respecting individuals that we disagree with. You can respect somebody at the same time disagree with them and debate in a manner that's respectful.
Does Donald Trump bear some responsibility for that? Does he need to change his rhetoric?
You know, it's odd. This is a man that came less than an inch from losing his life, and the question is, you're worried about him? I think when I look at all Americans, I mean, I don't know that I look at our current president that less than 2 weeks ago said you put a bullseye on Donald Trump. What I'm trying to be is a fair American to tell everybody to dial back. I think anyone that gave any rhetoric has some responsibility to where this country has gotten in the last couple of years when it comes to politics.
And did you say that to Donald Trump today? Did you say, look, we need to think about the kind of rhetoric that we have here. We can set a standard here.
My call today with the president, with a man that came so close to losing his life, wasn't about that. It was a concern for him personally. And I'm amazed that he's here today. He doesn't push anything back. What it shows to me is what Donald Trump really values. It's not about him. It's what he wants to do for the country. And think about it. Anybody who runs for president, though, the fear that they could have, he could do a lot more in life. He could be very happy at Mar-a-Lago, but he's willing to risk that even when his own family's concerned. And so I think if you watched Donald Trump through this whole campaign, I think this is a new Donald Trump that is more disciplined, that is more focused, that understands what it matters for this country for the next 4 years. And I think you'll see something much different probably here Thursday night than you've seen in the past.
And we may see him even before Thursday night.
I think so.
Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And ahead, when we come back, what's next for the candidates, the campaigns, and the country? Our political team on how this shooting changes everything.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and news. I am constantly curious and constantly want to learn. I know I personally want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter.
Donald Trump is now fundraising off the attack, and President Biden is planning to resume campaigning on Tuesday after canceling an event tomorrow. The FBI said today that threats of political violence are increasing. They are monitoring online chatter. I want to bring in our political team for a look at what this means for this presidential race. Let's start with Robert Costa. And Robert, what are you hearing from the Trump campaign tonight?
Former President Trump, Nora, has a major decision to make within the next 24 hours. Who is he going to put on the Republican ticket as his running mate? The vice presidential selection expected to be known sometime by Monday night, maybe Tuesday morning at the latest, based on my latest conversations with people close to former President Trump. At the top of the list, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who now has an increased security presence outside of his home, though that does not necessarily signal in any way he's the pick. It's something we have picked up at CBS News. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, as well as Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, though we've been told that former President Trump has discussed more than a dozen names in the past week as he mulls that final decision. We're all waiting, though, to see if an offer has formally been made. No word yet on that.
And Robert, one surprise, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador who was campaigning hard for the Republican nomination, recently released her delegates, was not expected to speak here, is now slated to speak. What does that tell us?
I was with former Ambassador Haley when she was in the final days of her campaign. She was making overtures to traditional Republicans, and many of them across the country continued to vote for her in Republican primaries, even after she suspended her campaign. For her to come to this convention, not just to release her delegates, but to give a speech, is a real boost for the Trump campaign at a crucial time where they want to consolidate Republican support across the country, especially those Republicans who might be wary of former President Trump's conduct, thinking about his legal challenges in particular.
Robert Costa, thank you so much. Now I want to bring in senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe and our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. Ed, on that note, Trump is now fundraising off of this assassination attempt. What are the pitches?
I mean, among other things, he's basically saying that he loves his support. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, MAGA. And he sent at least 3 or 4 of these today, over the course of the day, as he continues to recover and talk to supporters. This creates an awkward time in American politics. We now know, for example, the president, while he has suspended his advertising for the weekend, while he postponed a visit on Monday to Texas, is essentially going to resume campaigning on Tuesday by going out to Nevada, keeping to a schedule that has him stopping by the NAACP and another Latino civil rights group to talk about voting rights and other concerns in the black and brown communities. And you will see the campaigning essentially resume. He will begin with advertising. He'll sort of echo what he said tonight, which is that there can be a substantive debate about the issues in this country, and it can be done peacefully. We also heard today that the heads of the Democratic and Republican parties spoke to each other last night to also talk about, can we keep the temperature down? Can we try to help quell the violence or the threats of violence and hope that, you know, the next 3 months of this campaign are somewhat peaceful. But you talk to Democrats today, those that are willing to talk, and they concede the next few days are going to be quite perilous for them from a crass political perspective because we've never seen this before. In fact, tonight, the Biden campaign chief, Jen O'Malley Dillon, saying that much like the beginnings of the pandemic 4 years ago, we may be entering a period where things are just so unchartable in terms of how it is one can campaign and reach Americans at a time of such rancor.
Right. The president in the Oval Office address telling people it's time to lower the temperature in our politics, and we have a responsibility to cool things down. If you want to take action at the ballot box.
Precisely, Nora. And politics in our country is frequently interesting. It is rarely riveting. It will be riveting for the next 4 days here in Milwaukee. People who are not necessarily drawn to politics are going to want to watch this convention to see what former President Trump does, how often he appears here, what is his stylistic approach, what is his rhetorical approach, and what signals do the rest of the Republicans who are here cheering him on take from his demeanor, his attitude, and his tone. All that is going to be sifted anew in light of this traumatic, tragic experience on Saturday that will echo through the country, not just for the next few days, but for the next few weeks. And quickly about Nikki Haley. In talking to the Trump campaign, it was important in this moment, they said, to emphasize in a way that was unexpected this call for unity within the party. Bring everyone here, even a sharp detractor of former President Trump, in this moment to say, everyone is welcome. We are all united as Republicans, and we will support former President Trump in this moment of not only survival and duress, but progress toward the future.
And not only is it about unity, resolve is a word I heard several times today. Talked to one senior party operative who's been at conventions like this since the 1970s. He says, I've never seen people so resolved, so focused on winning in November, believing that what transpired yesterday can really slingshot the party into some kind of a victory. And the other thing he pointed out, he said, there has been so little chatter now, not even that much interest or concern about who he picks as his running mate, because there's the belief that whoever it is, it may not matter, he may be able to pull this off.
I want to bring in political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is outside here where the Republican National Convention is being held. And Caitlin, I know you have an update on some of the security precautions that are being taken. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Nora, as you can see behind me, there are barricades up, and there are 2 security zones guarding this area. What you see behind me, that's what's known as the red zone or the hard zone. That is protected by Secret Service. Where I'm standing is still part of the broader security perimeter outside the convention, but this is what's known as the soft zone or the yellow zone. What's significant here, Nora, is that Wisconsin is actually an open carry state, and firearms are allowed where I'm standing right now. They are not allowed behind those gates behind me because that's protected by Secret Service. But Wisconsin state law prohibits the city of Milwaukee or local jurisdictions from banning firearms. The Secret Service protects that area, so they are not allowed there, but they are allowed here. And that has come up. I was at a Secret Service briefing earlier today, and the Secret Service overseeing this convention where about 50,000 people are expected to come said they have no plans to expand that Secret Service perimeter, that red zone, and that there are no real threats at this point. Nora.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you. Also want to bring in Scott McFarland because he is still in Butler, Pennsylvania. He was there covering the rally where there was that attempted assassination attempt. And Scott, what's the community talking about tonight?
Nora, this transcends politics here. Butler County wants to ensure nobody else has anything close to a shared experience. They're talking about their children. Kids already have to deal with lockdown drills and worry about school shootings. We as parents have to warn them about who they talk to in their own neighborhoods, what they see on a computer. And now we have to explain those images and this tragedy to children. There's talk about summoning our better angels. It is modeling better behavior for our children and ensuring they don't have this worry too. They should be enjoying the joyful periods of their lives.
Scott McFarland, thank you for your coverage over the past day. We appreciate it. Finally tonight, the last 24 hours have been one of the most unnerving in recent American history. A presidential candidate, the victim of an assassination attempt. This is something many have never witnessed before. On Saturday, the political rhetoric turned violence. We do not yet know what the shooter's motive was, and we may never get all the answers. But one of the questions tonight, could this be an inflection point in the country's history? For 2 sides of the aisle who may not agree on much, there's one theme we've seen since last night's events. It's time to turn down the heat on the rhetoric, with both candidates for president calling for unity. Now, earlier tonight in a rare Oval Office address, President Biden called on Americans to cool tensions. He told voters to come together and resolve differences at the ballot box, not with bullets. With 114 days left until the election, some lawmakers are reminding the country it is important to remember we are Americans first, not Democrats, not Republicans, Americans. Our coverage is going to continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and for those of you in the West, on a special edition of the CBS Evening News. And stay with us right here throughout the week. We are going to have full coverage of the Republican National Convention every night at 10 o'clock Eastern right here on CBS.
So let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did
English?
any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
Why?
It's time for the CBS